All right, what's going on, everybody? Corey here with the Long Island Lacrosse Journal and FLG. We got a special guest here, Chris Gill of Crease Lacrosse. Chris, how you doing over there?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Cor.
Yeah, man, it's great to have you on to talk just about what you've developed, your experience. We definitely want to talk a little about your playing and coaching journey. I think it's good to go back and for people to understand your roots a little bit. So maybe we should start there. You want to talk a little about your upbringing, where you grew up, and talk about your college career as a player.
Sure. So I grew up in Hauppauge in Suffolk County. Grew up playing lots of different sports. Played a lot of hockey goalie, played some catcher, played baseball for most of my life. And then in middle school, as many lacrosse players, at least from my generation, started. I didn't make the middle school baseball team because you could only have so many catchers, and so that's a lot of my friends were like, hey, once I didn't make that team, they're like, hey, you're a pretty good hockey goalie, like come play lacrosse. And then went in a friend's backyard who had a net, and that was a really big deal when we were in middle school back then. And
Not as common as today.
No, nowhere near. It was like a really special thing, you mean you have a hockey net we're going to shoot on? It's like, no, I have a lacrosse net. Very expensive back then, it was really rare. So I would go, and then it would be like a thing. Like a lot of friends would come over, and to have a goalie to shoot on was kind of a special thing for them. And I enjoyed it, and I really liked it. So I started going to camps and stuff from there. Really got into it, and I discovered that I was pretty decent at it when I was playing up in different brackets. When I was, 8th, 9th grade, I was playing with juniors and who were getting recruited. And I went to, I think it was Army lacrosse camp, and I got recruited to the University at Albany. So I went there 2001, which was the first Division I year for the University at Albany. And I was there from 2001 to 2004. And that was, a really, really amazing experience for me.
That's awesome, man. And you talk about being like a catcher and a hockey goalie, and can you touch on how some of that stuff translated from like being a goalie in those other sports to being a goalie in lacrosse?
Sure. I have a brother who's 6 years older than me. So, kids in the neighborhood were typically always older than me. So we played a lot of street hockey. That was like our thing back in the 90s. Like street hockey was really where it was. Yeah. Yeah, Yeah.
Baggy clothes.
The License to Ill tape in the boombox. Yeah, of course. Some Beastie
Love
Boys.
it.
Yeah. And
Nothing better.
yeah. And, especially when we had like vacations and whatever, we're out in the street playing hockey, and these kids were all older than me. So it was kind of like stick the young kid in the net. They had equipment. Then eventually I got equipment, a little bit at a time. And I always played against kids who were older than me. So I felt really comfortable. Then when I played, kids who were my age, I felt pretty good. So it was a lot of hand-eye coordination, dialing in on the ball or the puck or the street hockey puck or whatever it was. And then same thing with catcher, the physicality of, being able to stop the ball on a bad pitch. And also, I think the hand-eye coordination of, dialing in on that ball, no matter where that ball was moving, and trying to frame it as a catcher. And it's interesting too, because you see a lot of parallels of like, especially with catching, your upper body might be moving one way or another, but your lower body is kind of standing still. And the same thing when I coach and train my goalies, it's, your eyes you're dialed in on that ball, and you're totally still to react to that shot, but your legs, it's the opposite of catching. Your legs are actually pivoting and going around your arc, and then ready to explode to that ball. So I think there's a lot of parallels there. And I think it's important for kids to play, other sports, and kind of to let them, number one, get hungry to play more lacrosse, obviously. And then, and number two, to prepare them. So I became that kid who played other sports to get ready for lacrosse season.
Cool. And you mentioned you're at Albany 2001 and 2004, which must have been a pretty tremendous experience. And I don't think everyone's 100% familiar on the history of Albany lacrosse, and just all the amazing I think alumni have come out of the program and have contributed to the and stayed with the sport of lacrosse. You want to talk about your experience and how it influenced like what you kind of do today as a coach and as a dad, and as obviously someone who's running a successful goalie training company?
Yeah, sure. When I went to Albany in 2001, there was a coaching change that was happening as they went Division I, and we were lucky enough to get Coach Marr in, who is coming from, he had coached at Delaware. He played at Hopkins, coached at Delaware and Maryland, and he came in and he is, an amazing guy. He's really great at what he does and shaping not only the style of play. I fell in love with the style of play of just playing really, really fast, making a save, getting it out, playing fast, getting turnovers on defense and getting the ball upfield, transition play, which, I try and coach as much as possible when I coach now. And not only that, but like the next play mentality. He brought something with him to Albany. Many things, but something that really stuck with a lot of us is the term "be the best." We say it at every huddle and every breakdown, and that's something I've really like latched onto. The idea of no matter what you're doing, whether you're you're on the field, you're in the hallway in school, you're doing your homework, just be the best. Do the best that you can. No one ever regretted doing the best that they could. And sometimes you fall short, but that next play mentality is really, really big too. And it's a grind. It's easy to say. It's really easy to say, this might, one of the guys on my team dropped the ball, or I dropped the ball. And instead of like getting down on yourself or getting down on your teammate, getting, next play. The first couple of times it's very difficult to do when you're kind of like, oh man, that was a big catch you needed to make there. But, once everybody buys into it, it's a really amazing thing. And it really affects how you coach and your life afterwards too.
Yeah, definitely. It's kind of like that ripple effect where you generate enough kind of like positivity and enough of the right terminology when you handle difficult situations. The result can be effective because you have so many people like bought into that concept. And I think also that's a really smart way to combat what negativity. Unfortunately, like one negative like moment is so much. It's kind of more, I'm not going to say more valuable, but weighs more than one positive interaction. So like you have to be really careful falling into that trap of like negativity, because it can crush a team and affect how people's confidence is and how they play. So that makes sense. Now let's talk when you graduate from Albany.
Sure.
Just kind of how you stayed connected with the game and what you did from there.
Yeah. Just to go back, one of the really amazing things about playing on that level and playing for that team, the University of Albany is really just a family. Even to this day, we play up in Placid together. We play summer league together, a lot of guys, and we're all connected through family. Actually, one of my best friends in college is now my brother-in-law. So my kids and his kids are cousins. So
That's cool.
It's just that kind of community. You stay so close with these people for the rest of your life. And a lot of programs offer that, but I think University of Albany is a really special place. Really, fantastic and special people. And, in 2004, my senior year, I was a backup, but I was able to be voted a captain by, my teammates and my coaching staff. And that really meant a lot to me, to be a backup goalie and to be a captain. And that's something that I think I'm most proud of in that experience. And that, going forward in my career as an educator and as a teacher was like one of the things that I really just was most proud of. In 2003, we played in the first Sweet 16 out of, any of the University of Albany programs. And that team, the 2003 team, along with Kevin Ray, who was the goalie who started in front of me, and Luke Aquino, they got into the Hall of Fame, but they also it brought us all into the Hall of Fame as the first team to make the Sweet 16 at the University of Albany. So that was special.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And so that success breeds success. Just like you said, that negative moment can kind of turn things around and poison everything else. When you kind of have that positive mindset, and it's not always easy and it doesn't always work, but always coming back to it, I think leads to more success. So I've been, teaching for over 15, going on my 16th year teaching now. And I started teaching in New York City, and now I'm coaching and teaching out here in Nassau County. So it's a lot of fun, and you realize the effect, now as an adult, having kids and seeing how much I coach, and not only through Crease, but through the other teams that I coach, seeing the effect that you kind of have on kids. It's it's important and it's powerful to realize that, you know, not every play you're going to be the most positive person, but you got to try and instill that in your team and your kids and yourself.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, especially, you know, as we start to talk specifically about goalies and, you know, goalie training and all that stuff. Like it's a super unique position. I think, you know, to your point, you know, one of the things that's so unique about it is like if you consider, let's say, getting scored on a disappointment, you know, that could happen so consistently in such a short period of time in one game, right? So
Yeah.
you need to be dialed in, I think, as much physically as you are mentally, because it really is can mess with you if you don't understand how to manage those types of situations and those emotions. So I guess to start, just as like an educator and as a teacher of the position, like how do you approach the mental aspect of like saying like, hey, like this is how you get through this situation, this is how you stay sharp on that, etc.
Yeah. It's really important that, um, you stay kind of even keeled. And I'm a pretty passionate person, so that's really tough for me.
Hmm.
Um, you know, at times, you know, you get carried away one way or the other. Um, but it's really important to kind of try and balance yourself between positive plays. I know, you know, when I played and when I still do play, it's tough as a goalie because you always kind of look at yourself whenever that ball goes in. Doesn't matter if it's a one-on-one on the crease,
Hmm.
you know, it's like, ah, I should have had that. But like, you know, me and Zach Oliveri, we started the Long Island Goalie Academy. And one of the things we talked about in our first session this year is, you know, bringing your team in after a goal. And you see a lot of college and high school goalies do this, and just talking about what happened, you know, without
Hmm.
assigning blame. And if it was something that you screwed up on, you know, if I screw up a clear and that ball comes back and we get scored on, the first thing I'm doing in that huddle is being like, hey, I need to clear that ball. You know,
Hmm.
I'm not getting totally down on myself, but at the same time, I'm holding myself accountable. I'm letting my defense know that that's the situation that happened. And you know, that next play mentality is huge. It's a scoring game, so it's tough as a goalie to stay centered and stay with it. But you know, you always have to stay dialed in. You always have to, you know, get that next save and then the next play. And it's such a run kind of position where if you give up the first 3 goals and make no saves, that could
Hmm.
put you in the can for the day mentally.
Right.
You know, but you make that one save and that one clear changes the whole entire game. If that's an overtime game, you know, if that's a 1 goal game, right? That one transition play can change everything. So you always have to be ready to make that one last save, regardless of how you played the first, you know, quarters before that.
Yeah, that's a good point. And then also like if you're trying to make the first couple plays count, you know, in a game, it's not always just like, okay, like wherever this shot comes from, like, you know, hopefully I'm going to save it. It's like, no, you're trying to work together as a defense
Yeah.
to try to give up a shot that you know you have a higher percentage or a better chance of saving. And I think that just ties into how the position, while it is, you know, you kind of are the last line of defense. Sometimes it's just you. It feels as though it's like you against the world. It's like you're really
Yeah.
working as a collective unit to try to accomplish a goal, which I think some people don't always realize because
Yep.
the position at the end of the day does get neglected at practices. You know, sometimes when it comes to training, you know, I
Yeah.
think sometimes as it comes to just game day stuff like that. So for you, you just want to kind of talk about the evolution of like why Crease Beast has
Mhm.
grown and you know what you do to kind of set yourself apart from some of the other training companies that are out there.
Sure. Yeah, it all started when I was working with a travel program, and you know, I was an assistant coach, kind of the defensive guy, and uh, it became clear with one group of with one family in particular. You know, the Leans. Matt Lean was really the first. Played at Mount Sinai High School. He played at Marywood, and he was really the first person I officially started training as like a crease beast goalie. I was like, you know what? There's a market for this. I wish I had thought of it, you know, years and years ago, but I was teaching in the city. It was tough to get back and forth and coach lacrosse at the same time. So I could only do really weekend stuff at that point. And having, you know, a young child at that point was difficult. But, you know, you know, Mr. Lean was like, hey, you know, I want to get my son some extra work. And then he had another son, Kenny, who's now, you know, in high school at Mount Sinai, and he was younger and he wanted to get him work. And it just kind of evolved from there. You know, they recommended me to other people. They were, you know, happy with not only just the process, you know, physically and technically, but also, you know, I think, you know, mentally, that we were kind of really on the same page about what was important, as far as, you know, learning psychological aspects of the game and that next play mentality as much as I try and teach it. And it kind of snowballed from there. And I was like, you know what, I think I could really, there's a market for this. And I think that, being, an educator really helps me with this, in the sense that I as a backup too, I studied film like crazy. I was the
Hmm.
scout guy. So I almost think that really led to my coaching career more than anything else, although I wasn't
Right.
comfortable with it when it happened at the time.
Hmm.
But you see everything. You hear the coaches, you hear the planning, you hear, and then I'm scout team, so I got to watch, what their defense is going to do, and we got to mimic it, and and so being a student of the game in that sense really helped improve. And from there on in, I started getting goalies of all different, kind of ages, boys and girls, from PAL level to college, and then started helping some of these high school goalies that I was training, or middle school goalies as I trained them through the years to get recruited into college and to get looks. And so it's just really, taken off from there. And, it's a lot of fun. I try and have fun. I try and do different things with my goalies. They, some coaches call me a little bit of a witch doctor. You've seen me show up to sessions. I have like 6 bags, and I have like, like, what does he have? Like, how many lacrosse balls? There's sessions where we spend 40 minutes not taking any shots. And like, some of the parents are like, I don't know about this guy. And the kids are like, this is great. Cause I mean, think about it. What did the kids get? And any, sometimes high school programs or PAL programs or even travel, like a lot of the time, like you said, there's very little time to work with those goalies. So what they get is shots. They
Hmm.
don't learn their footwork. They don't learn their technique. They don't learn how to have fun, training for that position and how to do different movements, which can, make them more explosive, right?
Hmm.
Or make them dial into a shot a little bit more. So I do the best that I can to continually educate myself. I always find new drills. My players also will take a drill that I have and they'll be like, hey, what if you do it like this? And anytime that I have a goalie change my drill, and I've had goalies from second grade all the way through college and high school adapt my drills. I always let them name the drill because I have names for
Hmm.
all my drills. So they get to name the drill. It's their drill. They name it whatever they want. And so it's, it's kind of fun. They really enjoy that because now their skin is in the game. They're coaches too. And I'm very
Hmm.
big on that coaching tree, based on where I came from. Coach Marr and Coach John Schveck, who was our defensive coordinator there, have a huge coaching tree of guys,
Hmm.
from back in, the start of their career to now, who are all high school coaches, college coaches. And, I think all of us kind of carry with us, those things that we learned from them.
Yeah, it's really cool that you kind of allow your players to take some ownership in this experience and the adventure that they're kind of embarking on. Because, like you said, you have a kid who's in first, second grade who just falls in love with the position. He's working with you. Could be years.
Yeah.
That he's with you. So I think it's really cool that he feels a part of it. Can you just talk real quick about the difference between maybe doing like a one-on-one goalie session where you're coming
Mhm.
maybe to work with like a specific kid, and then maybe the difference between that and working in like a small groups setting, like how do you kind of approach those
Sure.
two types of learning environments, because obviously they're a little different.
Yeah. Anytime that I'm working one-on-one, I always have, a practice plan with me. And that goes for when I coach teams also, whether I'm coaching my son or my daughter's, PAL or travel teams, or, I recently got named the Puerto Rico U15 head coach, the national team there. I have plans for what I'm going to do for each, practice based on what I've seen. I kind of give a couple of drills to see, what we need to work on.
Hmm.
And then what I'll do is I'll adapt that to each individual player. So if I do a day where I'm doing, I don't know, 4 or 5 different goalies, I usually will know those goalies,
Hmm.
and I'll know what their strengths and weaknesses are. And so I'll have a practice plan where we're always going to do footwork. We're always going to do hand-eye coordination. We're always going to do some form of a warm-up, and then we're always going to compete. We're always going to have a game between me and them, whether I'm
Hmm.
the shooter or they're shooting on me. We're doing positioning stuff. How fast can you do it? How many reps can you get in a certain amount of time? We gamify everything to make it,
Hmm.
fun. And whenever we do those lessons, if there's something specific that I see needs tailoring, for example, I had a goalie who really needed off hip work, and he was about to go into college, and I had a whole plan ready just for him. And I kind of, after the footwork, I scrapped it because I saw he was really struggling off hip. And I was like, all right, now we're going to do these 3 or 4 other drills. So, I've been doing this for a few years now, and I have, a library of basically drills that, not only that I've seen and used myself, I've used on other goalies. And like I said, the goalies that I have adapted and kind of named and changed. And I always have, one thing when I have a new client, they're always saying like, are you going to show up to the training, the clinic, or is it just under your name? Yes, it's me. I'm Crease Beast Lacrosse. The only thing that I love to do is the goalies who are usually in college or seniors and committed, they will come and they will help me in my training. And I've usually been working with those goalies, and I have huge trust in those goalies. I know them personally. I know their families. They know my family. And I've worked with them for years. So they've used the drills, and then they'll adapt it too. So I'll give the practice plan in that clinic, and I'll say, hey, you're going to run this station, you're going to run this station, or what stations do you want to? So I'll come with the clipboard and I'll just dump it down, and they run to the clipboard and they try and grab, I want this one. I want, butt end ball. I want Jedi drill. I want this drill. I want that drill. And then as they're doing it, sometimes we'll see in clinic that it's not working out. And I'll take a look, and my favorite thing, this is kind of a nerdy lacrosse thing, but my favorite thing is when, I'm running a drill and I look over to my side and I see one of my Crease Beast goalies, who's now one of my Crease Beast coaches, who I still currently, will work with one-on-one, or when I see them adapt a drill, like on the fly, this 18 or 19-year-old kid who is now all of a sudden taking like ownership of that drill and saying, hey, coach, you told me to do drill X, but now I got 4 kids in this group and it's not going to work because I don't want 3 kids waiting. And that's always my thing. I want every kid moving. I want every kid working to the best of my ability. When they adapt that drill, and I've been working with the kids since, 9th grade, and all of a sudden now as a college freshman or whatever, they're like, all right, coach, I'm going to take that drill and adapt it and change it and make it better. Like, to me, that's the best, that's a
awesome.
really gratifying moment, So in those clinics, I try and do as much group work as possible. But it is important to separate the kids based on, age and also, skill level, so that you do have time to go up to that kid who needs the help in their stance, for example. When you have kids who are really high level with kids who need help with their stance, that's very difficult to bridge those 2 levels. It's almost like an AP kid sitting in the classroom with, a kid who's just starting, formal high school, education. Like, they're on different levels, so you need to group them accordingly so that when you're with the group of the higher level kids at a different time frame, you can push them to be their best. And the newer kids, you can teach them the techniques that they need to use and try and get them to that next level as well.
Where did the name Crease Beast come from?
A lot of thinking. It took me a while. I wanted to make sure, as you know, and as I was talking about before, I'm a pretty passionate person. And sometimes if I have something in my head, I need to get it done and I need to do it. But I knew this was something that was going to be mine. And I knew it was something that was going to be, I didn't want to change it from year to year to year to year. I didn't want to change my symbol. I didn't want to change this. I didn't want to change that. And I knew it would take time. So just over a period of time, it might've been a couple of months of just playing around with a lot of different ideas and stuff. It's just like, I knew when I'd get it, and I was like, oh, this is it. And then from there, it just, flew.
That's great, man. Well, let's touch on a little bit more too, how people can kind of like stay engaged with your brand, learn about your training, follow you guys. Like, what's the best way to get in touch with, with Coach Gill if they want to work alongside you?
Yeah, you could check me out. I like Instagram because, as a parent myself, if I'm going to bring my son or daughter to train, I kind of want to see, testimonials, what they do, what their kind of culture is. The culture is a huge thing, kind of like what I talked about earlier. So Instagram, I think, is great because you could see the history of like not only my players and their successes, kind of what I'm about and what I believe in. So that's at Crease Beast Lacrosse on Instagram. My website also, has that. You can go to creasebeastlacrosse.com and, my information's there. You could DM me on Instagram, or at the bottom of my website, you could leave a message, which gets emailed to me. My email is also creasebeastlacrosse@gmail.com. And I'm doing some virtual sessions now with, you know, the unfortunate situation with the way things are now.
Hmm.
Doing some virtual work, you know, and I adapt each practice plan to what, you know, what resources, you know, kids have. You don't really need much. You don't need someone really shooting on you to get a
Right.
lot of work done. And if you happen to have someone who's going to shoot on you too, that's just another thing. A lot of kids have rebounders or brick
Sure.
walls or schools near them that they can use. As you know, through the great stuff that you guys do on Instagram and through videos, there's a lot of things that you can do to get better and to, you know, push yourself to that next level.
Sure. And yeah, one thing I want to mention here that we're both really excited about is we're going to be doing a free webinar where that you'll be hosting, that we'll be working together on, I guess you'd say, to cover the nuances of the position and just to teach and educate. And I think people can get a really good taste of what Crease Beast Lacrosse is about on the webinar, which is going to be on May 7th. We're going to be doing that at 4:30 that anyone can dial into virtually. And you know, this is just a slide that you put together and an example of some of the things that we're going to be discussing. So stance and positioning, you know, that's one aspect of the game that's really important. You break down the difference between where your hand should be versus your hips versus your feet. You want to touch on real quick, Chris, some of the other things that we'll focus on in the webinar that people can learn from you about.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. What I'll try and also do in that webinar is I'll show you guys some rebound control kind of tricks, because especially at the younger levels, it's tough for kids based on you know, their size or their ability of just figuring out the trick of how to corral in a rebound. Even high school kids and college kids, you know, I try to simplify things as much as possible and scaffold through my education background. And so, you know, rebound control is a big thing for me. There's a couple of easy little tips that really changed my game that I'm going to share. And also some drills that you can do at home. And, you know, some basic Crease Beast or CBL principles that we're always going to, you know, encourage goalies to do no matter what level they're at. And, you know, one thing that I also think is important is that every goalie is different. You know, I don't treat every goalie the same because they're all different. They're snowflakes, you know. You know, so, you know, me, I'm a bigger guy. I'm a ball stopper. You know, you're not going to catch me past the restraining line. And if you do, I'm going to be in big trouble, you know. Or I'm not going to have the ball and I'm running back towards the crease. So, you know, my style of play is going to be different from other goalies. But, you know, that being said, you know, there are ways to coach certain things. And I always give kids the option. Hey, do your hands feel comfortable here or there? And so
Mhm.
I'll give what I think, from my, you know, professional opinion, are the best tips as far as stance and position are concerned. But those things are always adaptable, because you know what? When you get to another level, your arc might become different when you're dealing with, you know, 95-mile-an-hour step downs. So
Sure.
that's another thing to think about and consider.
Awesome. Well, Chris, we really appreciate your time, man, and learning more about Crease Beast, and we look forward to catching up on the 7th, talk a little bit about the goalie position.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the time today, Corey.